Brian and I are here with Nick Milanovich. He is the speaking scientist, and he's here to talk to us today about how to merge technical with great speaking and presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nick.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So before we get started and talk about the details, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to becoming the speaking scientist.
Sure. It's very unexpected, actually. I went to school to study chemistry, and which I did for a long time. So I have my PhD in biophysical chemistry. So it covers a lot of different sciences, and I had intended to be a professor. But I quickly realized that after I was finished with school, I was really done with being at school in one form or another. So I went and I just got a job in the regular old world. I got hired on making toothpaste for Colgate-Palmolive, so I was working as a chemist there, mixing toothpaste, making new products, and that's probably where I realized that speaking is very different than all the speaking I've ever seen. Most of it has been professors and lecturers and scientists talking to other scientists, and that's its own world, and it has its place, but now I can't speak like a scientist if I'm talking to my marketing counterparts or I'm talking to my CEO, for instance. They won't care about like all the nuances of the science. They have very different things that they have in mind when they're listening to me speak. And so I started working on that for myself. And it didn't matter which job I had. I moved on from Colgate after a while, but that theme still stayed. I have to be able to speak to other people who are not in my field. And beyond working on it for myself, I had a job selling computer modeling software to the aerospace industry and structural engineers. Mm-hmm. Now, this software is meant for chemists with PhDs in computational chemistry, basically. And how do you speak to engineers? Well, it's not that trivial. And I saw that scientists that I would say are smarter than me, better, more pedigreed than me, and I'm watching them kill sales deals in an hour talking about the wrong thing. And it's like, okay, if we don't talk and communicate correctly, we don't eat. So that's the way I kind of bluntly looked at it. And then I just kind of look back at a scientist in any industry position. They have to be associated with the business. They have to bring value to the business because that's why they're there. And so if you can't communicate the idea, nobody can make a good business decision. Nobody will think that you're bringing any value to the company. And then so I started developing, my business name is Speaking Science, and then I refer to myself as the speaking scientist. But I work with scientists who need to speak, especially in situations where they have to convert their ideas to some sort of business result. Sales pitches, for instance, sales pitches, but I'm thinking investor pitches also. There's that as well. And so internal meetings and getting across to your own colleagues. So I've done all kinds of coaching of that sort, and I'm a practitioner, so I'm doing it all the time. It's not just me talking about theory and coaching, but I still do that actively myself. So,
do you think it's, because what's important to the scientist, right, is not necessarily always important to the business. Well, it's important, right? But it may not be important because they need to know how that translates into sales, right? So is it helping scientists also pull out, like, here's the key data points, like, that I need to, if I'm talking to the CEO, here's the key data points I need to make. If I'm talking to an end user of the product, here's the, key data points that are important to them, and modifying it for each audience?
Yes, you would. And I would say not only data, it's like, I would generalize it more. It's like, what's your message? What message are you trying to get across? Bring in your data to support your message when you need it. So you're selecting when to bring in data and what data to bring. And it has to help tell your story or send your message, basically. And it's not just introducing one piece of data, then another piece of data, then another piece of data. Every like bar graph I show you, you're gonna have to think about what the heck that means and interpret it.
Mhm.
And so I don't want to be there. I got 10 minutes. I don't want to inundate you with one, data summary after another. It's like
Right.
that by itself is meaningless. Like, okay, what does it mean to us?
Mhm.
You know, um, you know, and then extrapolate further. It's like, okay, I have this great technology, fine, and I see it works in the lab. Can I scale it up in my business?
Mhm.
Is that meaningful? What does that mean? Well, yes, you can scale it up, but it's going to cost you so much money that it's economically unfeasible, for instance.
Mhm.
That's what you want to, or a competitor is beating us up in the market. This data shows that we can, with this new technology, we can return the favor. So, that's what they want to know.
Right.
And,
Well,
and the
Nick,
data just supports that.
what do you think makes it so hard for the technical guys? Now you're a technical guy, you're a science guy
Hmm.
yourself. So what is it that makes it so hard? Um, I know we talked about different placing emphasis on different areas of importance, but is there
Hmm.
something in there in the way that they're processing or thinking that doesn't quite align with other areas? What is it that makes it so hard for these technical guys to get all of that awesome knowledge out of their head and out there?
Well, so there's a couple things. Is remembering who you're talking to, and that the people you're talking to may not have that same background that you do. Um, because me as a chemist, I've gone through like a decade of schooling and
Mhm.
then working in my career, and so I've mastered a language that you probably don't know really.
Right.
And so that's a big thing. There's that gap, and I can't expect you to know it because you haven't like invested the time that I did in it. So
Mhm.
things are abstract, and then regulating what you actually share. You don't have to disclose every little bit of everything you're doing. It's like what's meaningful to the situation.
Right.
Um, and it's like selecting your data to help tell your story, but you don't have to give me every single piece of information
Mhm.
um, to do that. I remember a time I was working for Sonicare, and I'd been working on this one project, this one method for like 2 years, right? And I'd written papers in really good journals in the field and given presentations, given talks at universities and conferences. Then I tell my own department, I give like a 1 hour little lunch and learn on it.
Mhm.
And my goal was to show how robust this whole thing, all this work is. And at the end, I realized I started talking to a marketing person. She goes, "Well, I understand that stuff, but how does it help me sell toothbrushes?" And I'm like,
Right.
I totally missed the point. I totally missed my audience on
Mhm.
that. And it was a real learning experience. Like I don't have to give you the fire hose version of everything. Um,
Mhm. Right.
so there are some people where I will have to do that.
Mhm.
And it's all bare knuckles scientific discussion, but
Mhm.
most of the time it's not. And
Right.
so um, it's choosing what data to show and how to show it.
Mhm.
You know, I tell scientists that actually PowerPoint is actually a really good tool used correctly.
Mhm.
You know, show me something visual. If you make something, show me the thing you're making.
Mhm.
If you can demonstrate it without it failing on you, demonstrate it.
Mhm.
Um, Probably a good example where we did that about 2 years ago. I work a lot with inventors now, and so they give me abstract ideas, and then I have to communicate it to my customer.
Mhm.
In that case, we had this idea to come in for a new savory snack, and if you think, and I look at the report, it looks very technical on how to make it and all that other stuff, and it didn't seem that kind of exciting when you look at the kind of summary of this idea. Um, but I had my customer come in. It was a big deal meeting with them, and I told my inventors, like, okay, make that snack for me.
Right.
Make enough of it. Bring it to me fresh. Who the heck doesn't like fried dough with salt and garlic on it? I mean, so instead of having a presentation with all the diagrams and all the technical stuff, I literally, during this big meeting, room full of people, I just put the snack right out on the table, and people devoured it.
Mhm.
And then I and then I told them the technical part of it, and then so that became a project.
Right.
And it was a hit just because I did it completely different.
Right.
I showed them versus hand waving and
Right.
thinking in the abstract. So.
Right. Do you think it's like any of us that we get excited about stuff, and I believe like excitement breeds excitement, right? But I think what you're saying is, the scientists get really excited about it, but they need to figure out a way to really show it or demonstrate it to the correct audience. And I think you guys did a great job with like having it there for them, because it's tangible now for them. It's very Shark Tank-esque, right? Where
right, it really merges the marketing, that advertising mindset with the science. Like that's what and that was one of the things that really drew me to you. We work with a lot of engineers, and they're really smart people, and I think seeing this spin on things, how great would it be if all the engineers we worked with also had this marketing mindset, right? I mean, that's what's really cool about it. So you're really merging the two disciplines, right?
You are, and if you think about it, scientists sometimes think, and when I say scientists, I mean engineers too. So like, let me just lump them all together.
Yeah.
And they find like sales or marketing to be a dirty word, but quite honestly, how do you think a professor gets his funding? How do you think anybody gets their money to do more work? They have to sort of communicate their idea in a way that the people with the funding can understand.
Right.
So, yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about, some examples. I want to talk a little bit more about how you translate the science into business, and kind of what, you talked about PowerPoint. Are there more things like that you really work with people? Are there certain things that are common that you need to work with folks on in this discipline?
I get a lot of people ask me to look at their PowerPoints. So a lot of people synonymously think that a presentation means PowerPoint. And so one of the first things I did when I started this business is to have basically a 1-hour seminar on what I call speaking science with PowerPoint. And it's just some basic ideas on how to use it and put it in its place, actually, at the same time. So people use it as their note cards that they just read and they plow through stuff. They figure getting through the PowerPoint and everything there is the whole goal. Or they just slap things together and then they add filler, which is like basically where you get your bullet points, and it's just dull. I can't, as a speaking coach, I can't make that interesting. I can't make bullet points interesting ever. You never will. It's about the driest thing, and it's impossible to make it interesting. And then I tell people, you don't need bullet points. So
what is
I
the
work a lot.
response to that when you say something like that?
They're used to a certain way, a certain standard that's been established with using PowerPoint. And I'm deviating from the norm, and that freaks people out. So I do the seminar first before I coach them oftentimes. And that one really hits home, and then they just kind of open up to me, because I use PowerPoint as a visual aid and nothing else. It is a visual aid. It cannot be the thing that tells the story. I can't be up there being the one. If my presentation is me explaining my PowerPoint slides, it's going to be a dud of a presentation.
So besides visual imagery, right? In your PowerPoints, should technical people also put charts in there? I'm not talking about big elaborate charts, but more like graphs and things like that. Is that something that becomes useful for them, for the audience? Where they show like, say, for instance, a curve or something, like product sales.
So in the PowerPoint, I think it has to be visual, truly visual, and words are not visual. It is an image of some kind, whether it's a data plot that's easy enough to understand in a very short period of time. because communicating in a written style is different from speaking. Think of speaking as more like you have to be like a commercial. You have to get something out in like 15 to 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And people have to understand it because you're moving on really quick. Whereas reading something, you can read, put it down, talk to people, read it again, and so on and so forth. It's just you're consuming information differently. But video is really powerful. Photographs are very powerful. If I say, hey, look, I'm making this thing. Show me the picture of the thing if you've made it.
Mhm.
You know, bring it into the room. Don't even bother using PowerPoint. You know, show me the reality of, you know, what you're doing. Probably one of the most powerful things I had done, believe it or not, I got hired in once as a scientist, and I became the marketing department for this company. And I was working on this fiber that's used in diapers a lot, and it's being sold and being made into diapers. And it was supposed to have like some skin health properties to it. And so I did all this science to it. I did this acid-base chemistry, and you know, I had plots and figures and did different types of experiments. And I'm thinking, oh crap, you know, I'm just going to exhaust me to explain all this on a sales call or a sales meeting. And then one customer says, I have like 10 minutes to get someone's attention on this product, and I can't go through a bunch of data. And so what I thought is, for my customer, I'll make a demo for them that they can do. It's a visual, and it's just color changes, basically, to demonstrate. So I went into the lab. I bought $40 in like studio equipment, little lights in the light box. I used my cell phone. I did all the chemistry. Scientifically, it's accurate. And that was the most powerful sales tool I had ever made at that point. And the customers wanted that from me, in addition to buying the stuff we were selling. My salespeople were using it. They didn't have to explain all the science, and I didn't have to coach them up on it. I gave it to someone to give to at a presentation, and then a year later, I showed. I was going through that presentation myself to someone and said, "Oh yeah, I saw this at a conference being used once a year earlier."
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, this video was like it wasn't that trivial to make, but when I made it, it was the most powerful thing I can use. No data whatsoever.
That's a really good point, the video. That's something we've been talking a lot about, you know, how companies are really embracing video from their, you know, from their employees, you know, and from behind the scenes, and just kind of getting, you know, like you said, with a cell phone, right? There's nothing high production about it. But, you know, how important do you think it is for these, I'll call them science guys, and we'll bucket them, these science guys to really get in front of any sort of device and start talking about what they're doing, you know, if they're working for a company?
You mean like using video, using
yeah, just like a simple cell phone, or, you know,
and not complicated.
it doesn't have to be.
Like you said, you know, just basically pulling out your cell phone, maybe a cheap lighting kit, you know, or even talking about things in front of the camera, you know, very simply.
I think if it helps get the message across, I think you should absolutely do it. Remember what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to get your message across. And it doesn't have to be restricted to one format or another, meaning it doesn't have to be restricted to PowerPoint and, you know, you expect everything to happen using just a bunch of slides. Video is good. Photographs are phenomenal. And, you know, there's various ways to communicate, and heck, scientists are experimentalists. Experiment. So it's one thing I always say, try something out. Something might be a dud, but, you know, give it a shot and see how it works, see how people react. So, but with video, definitely. I think video is becoming more common, and younger scientists are embracing it more than older ones overall. So
I agree. It seems like something that, you know, and well, but here's the thing. So you mentioned like the younger scientists, right? And so what would you say to these folks who need some sort of advice? You know, maybe they're self-conscious or shy, or they've gone into a field because they want to dive into the science and not be in front of a camera. What is the advice you give to them when they've intended to do this one way for their life, and now they're realizing they have to kind of adapt and get the message out in different ways?
So the way I look at it I want to emphasize the importance of communication as a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And the details of it may differ depending on what you do for a living. But if you think about it, any scientist has to do the science, and they have to communicate it to the world somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're a professor, you're writing papers, therefore you're communicating science. You're giving talks, at scientific conferences, at universities. You're communicating your science. And what are you trying to achieve by that? I mean, you're adding to your CV or your resume, of course, but you want to get your work out there. You want people to benefit from your work somehow. So I do think communication is super, super important, and mastering that is a survival skill, if you ask me. So, and yeah, I mean, I think I've seen, like I said, younger scientists are willing to do YouTube channels, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and do videos of various types. And so, I'm glad. And then they're emphasizing it, communication more. So I've talked to university students about their communication skills before, and even say business plan pitches or elevator pitches. So.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to see that, because it was not emphasized when I was going to school at all. So.
Yeah. So do you think, you mentioned like YouTube channels, right? Should they
Uh-huh.
also, be passionate about your work, right? Should you also be using other channels, not just YouTube, like, whatever, your Instagram to promote your work, your Twitter handle, I mean, I've even seen a lot of science stuff on TikTok, believe it or not, recently.
Mhm.
Should they be using all these channels to sort of get their work across?
I would say, number one, I always say experiment, and also know where your audience is,
Mhm.
right? Where does your audience go? I was thinking years ago, like was now forgot the name, Twitter, and then I realized my audience is not there necessarily.
Yeah.
So I'm still on Twitter, but I don't do too much related to speaking and communication there. So
Especially
it's
like
more just
Elon
for fun.
and Tesla, you know what I mean, or things like that, or SpaceX. Then it makes sense because he's catering to like a mass audience, So
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. And as new things come out, try them out, see what it really does. I think many years ago, people were talking to me about Prezi, which was a presentation software,
Yeah.
like an online thing. And I mean, I looked at it and I thought, this is a little bit too much motion for me. It was actually kind of making me seasick a little bit, even though it was visual. And so it's I can't see that, being used, but, give it a try, see what it looks like, whether it works. So.
if it makes sense for you, right, or your audience, then that's what
Right.
you.
Right.
That's right. It's who am I trying to reach? I'm not trying to reach students in science. I'm trying to reach sales and marketing people necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
VPs of engineering or something like people like that. Where are they going to reside?
Right.
So.
I like that, Nick. Brian, is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to talk to Nick about?
No, I think we hit all the topics.
What else, Nick? Do you have any last advice, final words for us before we find out where we can learn more about you?
Let's see. What would I say? I'm kind of interested in having further conversations with you guys, because you're doing something similar but in a different way, and I like learning about that kind of thing. And as far as scientists go, I mean, I really did this to help out my fellow scientists who were struggling with this. They work very hard. They're very clever. They're given very tough challenges to work on, and I'm kind of doing this to make sure that comes out and that gets appreciated and through communication. Because I've seen really good scientists struggle with that, and it's a shame. So, but they do bring value, and I just want, this is kind of my way of supporting my own kind, so my fellow scientists. So
I like it, Nick. Can you let everybody know where they can learn more about you and your company?
Yes, so you can go directly to my website. It's speakingscience.com as one word, and it is the name of my actual it's my business name. And you can reach me at nick@speakingscience.com, and the info is also on the website as well. It can reach me. You can also find me on LinkedIn under my name, Nick Milanovich. Feel free to reach out through there as well. Those are probably the two best places. So
awesome. Thank you, Nick.
Pleasure meeting you, Nick.
Yep.